Okay, ready? It's 7:08. We're going to call the Plan Commission to order. Mr. Eddy, please call the roll. And we're going to do this all loudly. We don't have a PA, obviously, because you heard why. And we do record it, so if you could speak up when we ask for the public hearing.
Mayor Olson?
Here.
Commissioner Hogan?
Here.
Commissioner Burkhardt?
Here.
Commissioner Haley is now absent. City Engineer Morrow?
Here.
Alderwoman Hanneman?
Here.
Commissioner Leone?
Here.
We have a quorum. Please rise and join the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item on the agenda is approval of the regular meeting minutes of January 6th. Any additions or corrections?
Second.
Hogan and Hanneman. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Item C1, Bear Development Incorporated, LLC, a duplex condominium single-family home development. This is an application for a natural resources special exception. Mr. Eddy.
City of Franklin Plan Commission will hold a public hearing on Thursday, January chambers at the Franklin City Hall, 9229 West Loomis Road, Franklin, Wisconsin, 53132, to take public comments regarding an application by Stephen R. Mills, president of Bear Development LLC, on property owned by Boomtown LLC, to request a special exception to the natural resource feature provisions for the purpose of allowing for a grading of approximately 23,900 provisions for the purpose of allowing for a grading of approximately 23,970 square feet of wetland buffer, temporary, and construction impact, permanent, for building footprints to approximately 1,350 square feet of wetland buffer and approximately 3,583 square feet of wetland setback on parcels identified as tax key numbers. Approximately 3,583 square feet of wetland setback on parcels identified as tax key numbers 891-9011-000 and 891-9012-000, zoned R8 multiple family residence district. This public hearing is being held pursuant to the requirements of Section 15-9. This public hearing is being held pursuant to the requirements of Section 15-9.0110 applications for a special exception to natural resource feature provisions and Section 15-10.0208 special exceptions to natural resource feature provisions of the City of Franklin Unified Development Ordinance. A map showing the property feature provisions of the City of Franklin Unified Development Ordinance. A map showing the property affected, full legal description, the application, and all supporting materials are available for review and may be obtained from the city clerk by way of request to the Department of City Development of Franklin City Hall, 9229 West Loomis Road, Franklin, Wisconsin, 53132 during normal business hours. The public is public hearing and to provide input.
The applicant is here with us this evening. Mr. Eddy, this has been before the Environmental Commission, has it not?
Yes.
And they have their responses to the questions as required by the Unified Development Ordinance?
Yes.
And we don't have the presentation available, so I apologize that the visuals are likewise not available on the screen. The Commission received copies of the natural resource protection plans in your packet, so I may refer to them at different points, and they're available for you. So the applicant submitted this request about the extent of the request. We do require that instead of a general request for impacts that we be given a numerical amount of request to wetland setback, which is the 50-foot distance from the edge of a delineated wetland, and wetland buffer, which is the 30-foot distance. So,
Commissioner Leone, and then
sure.
Speak that way.
Yep, I can do that. I'm going to have to take my stuff with me, so give me a second.
Just so that the audience can
So everyone can hear. Thank you.
And I'm trying the system again.
Are we able to get just video? Just video?
Nope. But maybe we will now. I apologize. I want you guys to hear it.
Can everyone hear me okay?
I want you guys to hear it.
Can everyone hear me okay? You in the back?
You can move up too. This is
Yeah.
not like church on Sunday.
Okay, thank you. So Wetland setback, the 50-foot distance from the edge of a delineated wetland or wetland, 50-foot distance from the edge of a delineated wetland or wetland buffer, which is a 30-foot distance. There are different standards for the protection of each of these natural resources, and the applicant has since revised his request. So the notice amount was for the amount described in the public. So the notice amount was for the amount described in the public hearing notice, but the notice amount has changed, and now the request is for a total amount of 1,350 square feet of permanent impact, I beg your pardon, to wetland buffer, and 25,320 square feet of temporary wetland buffer impact if BZBA did not approve a variance. And then there would also be wetland 6 square feet, and the described amount under the 25-foot option is 0. It is not clear how that will be accomplished, so we do need clarification of that point. The Board of Zoning Appeals, the Board of Zoning and Building Appeals did approve. In addition to wetland setbacks, we have property setbacks from the edges of buildings in the front. The original request was for the standard setback, which was 25 feet, so that the building would have to be farther away from the street and therefore have a greater degree of impact. To the Building Appeals approved a variance allowing a change to that requirement in the amount of 5 feet, so the requirement is now 20-foot setback, so the applicant will be able to move the building farther away from the natural resources. That reduces the wetland buffer request to 0. Temporary remain the same. Permanent wetland setback impacts from building pads would be lessened to 1,105 feet, and there remains the question of how much temporary impact there would be to wetland setback. So I have not described the site to you, but it is a condo development to the north of the future business park on Loomis Road. So it would be a condo development with 13 building pads for a total of 26 units. Development with 13 building pads for a total of 26 units for residential use. This body has reviewed a few different applications related to that. So it will be 13 building pads around a cul-de-sac, and the applicant has provided a natural resource protection plan. So, I'm a little bit, it's difficult to do this without drawings, but let's take out the natural resource protection plan. There's one labeled 25-foot setback option and one that does not have a label in red. And that one is for, so it's this one. They look substantially the same, but this doesn't have a label in red. So, okay, so we're going to revisit quickly the features of the site. So there are the 13 building pads, which are the squares on the rectangles. On the eastern border of the site is of wetland area, and you see the setbacks and the buffer. The western portion, that is also a wetland area with other natural resource features, including an area of isolated environmental corridor, which is the regional planning agency that indicates that that area has special natural resource features which are to be protected. So Also shown on this map are the limits of a fill permit. So on March 14th, 2018, the applicant received permission to place 37,500 cubic yards of fill on the site, with a permit that was approved both by the Department of Natural Resources and the City Engineering Department. It is contiguous with the limits of their current request for impacts to natural resources related to the grading that will occur for this development plan. At the time of that fill permit, there were no approvals sought for the impacts to the wetland buffer and setback. So the applicant has provided responses to questions as is required under the ordinance for the variance. So a primary comment would be that we still would need clarification on what, if any, temporary impacts to the wetland setback. That is the distance between the 30-foot buffer and the 50-foot distance, 20 feet from the 30-foot buffer. If there will be any impacts proposed to that, the applicant has obtained the appropriate jurisdiction. A requirement of approval is conservation easements. So the question before the commission this evening, the UDO requires that a natural resource special exception, if granted, not effectively undermine the city's ability to enforce natural resource protection standards with regard to the degree of non-compliance. So you, as a recommending body to the Common Council, must make a recommendation whether or not you think that the placement of fill on the site, which was conducted at the request of Fair Development in order to create a graded site condition, ability to enforce these protection standards. So that is one key question we're seeking a recommendation on. The applicant's responses generally refer to the site condition as having been previously impacted. A suggestion that conditional approval of an NRSE would be to do remediation of the site of some type to restore the wetlands, which delineations have shown have been impacted. The Environmental Commission deleted that recommendation from their recommendation, and made an alternative recommendation of restoration to the wetland setback and buffer with native plantings. So generally that meets the standards of the ordinance for restoration, but that restoration would only be to the wetland setback and buffer. A broader restoration would only be to the wetland setback and buffer. A broader restoration might be a remedy. Another requirement is that the applicant's request not have any practicable alternatives. The variance application did note alternatives. The variance application did note that the building pads are very general. They're boxes. And it would be possible for a building pad to potentially have a different configuration and therefore not impose a permanent impact on the natural resources. So you can get into the specifics of how that works, but generally speaking, especially considering the lesser degree of impact here, a different configuration, a two-story configuration is possible. A few technical corrections are necessary to whichever natural resource protection plan proceeds as that which would be adopted as part of the standards of findings and decisions of the Common Council. Those are things that can be resolved between staff and the applicant, but it's technical requirements, including pieces of information or the way still require that degree of impact, temporary impact. So the Environmental Commission did make a recommendation by motion that the applicant they revised conditions of the wetland setback and buffer, but deleted a recommended condition. The Plan Commission can require financial sureties attached to that restoration. They deleted that recommendation. So the Environmental Commission's recommended conditions are now incorporated into the standards, findings, and decision, which is before you as a draft. Applicant is here to answer questions as well. So, thank you.
Okay, so let's wait for just a second here. We have life on the controller screen. Let me ask a question of you, Ms. X. We're talking about 3 buildings impacting the wetland setbacks, is that correct?
Under the variance that was approved by the Board of Zoning and Building Appeals, that's correct. Permanent impacts to the wetland setback is what's in Building Appeals, that's correct. Permanent impacts to the wetland setback is what's currently being contemplated.
Okay. For those in the audience, there's several distances we're talking about. We're talking about a wetland, which is defined scientifically. That's one dimension. Then there's a wetland, that's one dimension. Then there's a wetland buffer, which is the distance from the wetland to a certain distance in, which you're not allowed to touch. And then there's a wetland setback farther than that, that you can set back farther than that you can do some things in, but it's designed as an incremental protection for the wetland. So there's 3 different measurements we're talking about. In this issue, we're talking about the farthest in, which is the wetland buffer. Any arguments there? Not a public hearing yet. So, all right, let's try this. There's a little bit of success. You want to try your computer? Success. Are you recording for everybody?
I'm recording with the handheld recorder.
All right, I'm going to record it here. Okay, this is the beginning of the recording of the Plan Commission meeting of January 20th. It is 7:24. It is now caught up. There's a previous recording that will be edited into this one. So with that, we have a properly noticed public hearing. We've had the presentation by staff of the issue at hand. And Mr. Schott, would you like to come up and give us your point of view? Use it right in here.
Are we ready?
Yeah.
Okay, Dan Shop with Bear Development, 4011 80th Street, Kenosha, Wisconsin. So tonight we're discussing the between West Ryan Road and State Highway 36. Our firm purchased the property in 2016 and without any specific development plans. In 2018, we were approached by the Wisconsin Department of Transportation, and there was a project in Hales Corner that was out of balance. They approached us, and we've cooperated in accepting clean structural fill from the Highway 100 project. So the DOT select fill site is technically exempt contractors, and the DOT, with us as co-applicant, filed an application for a fill permit, which we received from the city. So we performed all the requirements of that permit. We restored the property. The fill was placed, compacted under the supervision of at that time, and we had a permit. The fill was lawfully placed. Fast forward to 2021, we presented a conceptual plan before this Common Council for a property is within the TID number 6, so we are charged with producing a development that is of its highest value. So technically, when you do the calculations for site intensity, with the baseline zoning that's on site right now of R8, this site could 6 dwelling units. We have not chosen to go that route. We've chosen to do a ranch condominium plan. The impacts that we're talking about tonight are, they're there. They're already in the setback. They're already in the buffer away from the wetland. We've gone before the zoning board of zoning.
Board of Zoning and Building Appeals. Yeah.
And they, sorry, and they approved it.
Chairman's sitting in front of me, so you better get.
I know there's an acronym. We're talking about doing temporary grading in a wetland buffer to accommodate site grading for this development, rear yard storm sewer, and dry utilities for We Energies. We've done everything possible, in fact, as minimal as possible. But you can see from the plans that you have that there's a severe pinch point on the property. It's impacted on both sides by wetlands. We're looking forward to this development, and we feel the request is reasonable.
Questions for the applicant? Well, that's not appropriate at this time.
Mayor?
Commissioner Leon. Commissioner Leon.
My question.
No, you're not.
Okay, now you're on. You're up.
So my question really is for the applicant, because we have technology backup, is it up enough? Really is for the applicant, because we have technology backup, is it up enough that we can pause to see if Commissioner Haley is able to rejoin using the instructions? He usually has very valuable input on these topics, and I would like to make a good faith effort to get him to rejoin this. I would like to make a good faith effort to get him to rejoin this meeting if possible.
You can try to call again.
Do you have the computer?
No, it's not letting me to connect the computer or the screen. But we can try to call our phone.
Okay.
Just the sheet. Grab my mask while you're doing that.
So Kevin, Steve, we're about to put you on speakerphone. We lost the AV system, so we're going to do back to the basics. Are you prepared?
I've tried multiple and to do it, so they're waiting for you to
Yeah, we don't have a computer, so it's mic from the telephone. So I can't provide you any video.
Thank you.
All right. We've done a presentation by staff.
Your mic.
Oh,
okay.
We've done a presentation by staff. We've gotten the answer from Dan Shop from based on a state permit, and we did it to their rules. They're trying to lessen the impact of the buildings, pads, and keep them away from the wetlands. There's 3 buildings that impact the buffer. So that's essentially where we're public hearing. So there we are.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we have a properly noticed public hearing. We've got all kinds of technology issues, but I'm going to open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on this matter, this is a natural resources special exception. Public hearing, local ordinance, consent are sworn in. So, the city attorney will ask you for your name and address and swear you in. Anyone wishing to speak on this matter? Good evening.
Frank Januszewski.
Hold on, please. Okay. Frank.
Frank Januszewski, 12301 West Ryan Road. I'm back again, getting whacked from the other side. First,
Raise your hand. Raise your hand.
Promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
yes, sir.
Okay, Mr. Jason.
I, understand the technology issues, but you don't even describe where you're asking. Is it the east, the north, the south? You don't even describe where you're asking. Is it the east, the north, the south, the west? What? Why? This whole crowd has no clue what you're asking for. I saw the maps on the package on the website, but there's no description of where you're talking about. And it's easily described of where you're talking about. And it's easily described, but I don't know why you don't describe it. My concern is being on the west boundary. After you piled thousands of yards of fill, this area now that you want to put this walkway, it's flooded. I walked it today, and from Ryan Road going southwest, an eighth of a mile is under ice. It's completely flooded. So I'm attributing that to the fill. I've lived there for 20 years. I used to walk my dog down there. It's a swamp. And this is a year where we're 10 inches or more below normal rainfall. I have standing water on my property on 6 different places. And I never had that before. So I'm super concerned when they dump thousands of yards of dirt on this property. The water flow, you're going to have to raise at least 2 feet to put in the trail, if you want to put a trail in, because it's underwater right now. And I just don't understand why going on with the change in the water flow since thousands of yards of dirt were dumped on this property. And I don't see it addressed. I'm raising concerns right now because, if you go in there and put in this trail, it's going to be underwater. Nobody's going to use it. Walk it, drive by. Look, it's an eighth of a mile. It's not like a little puddle. It's solid ice for an eighth of a mile south of Ryan Road. And I've got standing water on my property that never existed before until they dumped it. I called the city because I didn't understand the beep, beep, beep from 7 o'clock in the morning until 7 o'clock at night. Why are they dumping all this dirt? Because nobody notified me as adjacent property owner. Well, come to understand the DOT doesn't require that. Just sign and go. Well, come to understand the DOT doesn't require that. Just sign and go. Well, I guess I have zero input on that, but I'm living different circumstances since you guys decided to accept that fill. I think it's a problem.
Thank you, Mr. Genesis. Thank you, Mr. Genesis. Anyone else wishing to speak on the matter? Yes, ma'am, good evening.
Evening. Do I gotta raise my hand?
Name and address, please.
My name is Karen Zalecki. My address is 11736 West Loomis Road.
You promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Absolutely.
Ms. Select, go ahead, please.
Okay, first of all, I want to address the planning commission about my disapproval about how I was informed about this hearing. Found, I guess, in this wrong map, but yet it was delivered to a different address. So with that said, how often are you doing this? And it's like most of our residents not being informed because of this. Yes, my name and address is correct underneath here, but I did not get it at my address. Okay. And with the regard of the grading and in the buffer zone of the designated wetlands, the concerns are high The disrupting of the buffer zone can have a lot of catastrophic effects to the ecosystem around it. As you know, this provides critical habitat for the adjacent ponds and streams, as well as assisting in control erosion and non-point source pollutants. Water runoff from the topographical changes that are being proposed could increase flooding in my yard and in my home, including my neighbors. This could possibly affect my well, which contamination greatly concerns me. And the wetland degradation marks that were also ignored on the adjacent properties on the land were also marked in brown on this map for future lots. So when the trees were knocked down, it seemed to be ignored. And another thing, ever since the grading and the topographical changes have been occurring on this property, I actually brought pictures for you. Okay? So, this has never occurred. So this is occurred. So this is a backyard. This is my pond that went underwater. This is us playing in the water.
Ms. Leck, just speaking.
We have like over 60-plus-year-old beautiful white pine trees that are dying, and some are even dead now because of the saturated grounds. They have been killed off, having yearly flooding since the project started back in 2018. I remember Burlington being underwater that summer, and we didn't have any issues. Since 2018, since that fill come in, that's when these pictures come into effect. More water in our property, more water getting closer. There's drain tiles in this area that has been there for years and are obviously not working anymore. And the increased construction is not alleviating the issues, but producing more negative impact to our properties. Is there a plan to replace these tiles? Ryan Road even flooded last year. The local residents do not recall. Ryan Road even flooded last year. The local residents do not recall this ever occurring. There has been conversations with representatives from Bears addressing the flooding concerns in the past, which have been ignored. Is this going to be the norm when more issues occur? Ignored. Is this going to be the norm when more issues occur? I'm in the process of consulting legal representation to help protect my residential property from further destruction and property value decrease. I have been advised that a topographical study of the impact, a possible impact of the grading, including in the buffer zone, to be done. I don't know, I couldn't really understand all you said. I don't know if that was ever done. It also has been suggested to me to actually require in writing from Bear and from the city of Franklin that any ill effects proposed plan of the construction, including the grading, will not affect surrounding properties, including my own. All properties need to be downward slope of this landscape. I'm at the end of the waterfall of all this construction. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Anybody else? Anybody else wish to speak? Davis, good evening.
We promise to tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do. So, I'm also a little confused about this project. I'm assuming it's something that was approved earlier, and...
Ms. Davis?
Yes?
You gotta do your announcement.
Oh, yes. Sorry. That part of the natural resources area of concern was on the south end of the construction area. In addition to the buffer behind. And I'm just wondering, in your original plan that the city, and I'm concerned about what the neighbors just shared because I wasn't aware of that, so thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Schock, do you want to address any potential changes to the building locations and building sites? Anyone else wishing to speak on this matter? Anyone else? Okay, seeing no one else rise, I will close the public hearing portion of this. Okay, Mr. Shop, you can talk about any changes in the buildings, impact on the south side of the property, in the buildings, impact on the south side of the property, that kind of thing.
The buildings have always been planned to extend, if we're talking about south towards Loomis Road, if that's the area of concern, the reason why the project is designed this way is we're aware of the maximum length of a cul-de-sac. You end the cul-de-sac from the right-of-way of Ryan Road to the bulb of the, you end the cul-de-sac from the right-of-way of Ryan Road to the bulb of the cul-de-sac. It's 800 feet, and that's how it's measured.
Have the buildings changed in size or location?
The only change in building location is that we brought them closer to the proposed per the variance that was approved last night.
Said differently, you moved them closer to the new street. And
Correct, away from the wetland.
Okay, we got more technology.
If you'd like, I can try to address the pond issue next meeting, but I can certainly add some. So we purchased the property where the pond is located. The pond I've done a lot of work on this, a lot of research, a lot of discussions with one particular neighbor. This pond is dug by the folks, I think it was in the 1940s. There's no outlet structure to the pond. So the only thing that controls the level of the pond is some kind of tile that daylights out into the ditch on Ryan Road. Through time and collapsed. If the council will recall, we were here for a CSM. This goes way back, probably 2019, where we were granted approval for 3 lots, but outside of the building pad of the homes, everything else is a conservation easement. Per the conservation easement that we agreed to, I cannot go in there and excavate and find that tile. This has been an issue that's been going around for a couple of years. So that pond does not have any relief to it. The relief that was there is relief to it. The relief that was there is damaged, crushed. The pond can no longer self-regulate. Typically, ponds have an overflow structure. This one does not. So we've come up with some ideas. I'm working with engineers right now on how to figure this out. But until I can go in and access, get from Ryan Road to the edge of the pond, there's nothing I can do.
Were we to come to something, would you go and take a look at it?
Absolutely.
All right. Heath, go and take a look at it.
Absolutely.
All right. Heath, comments on how we get the CSM to allow repair to a structure such as that?
It's not the CSM. It's not the CSM, it's the conservation easement that would have to be revised to allow for them to be able to do drainage maintenance in that area. That would be a relatively simple matter, but I don't have any language from anybody to revise it. And it's simply a matter of
Okay, so
And when we have that conversation, the release of the conservation easement is one thing, but historically, and I want to put it on the record so everyone knows, this pond drains towards Ryan Road, goes into the ditch, goes under 2 culverts, and heads north. Homes across on the north side of West Ryan Road. So historically, it goes that way, but when we actually fix this, it's going to go that way again. So I just want to make sure everyone knows.
Kevin? Kevin, why don't you give us a call? I was going to suggest, Kevin, that you dial in on Zoom, and yeah, you can go ahead and dial in on Zoom, Kevin, and answer. You got it.
I've tried repeatedly, and keep talking with the waiting for to start the meeting.
And we're about to do that. So give it 2 seconds and then. Thanks. I'm going to hang up. There we go. Okay, Kevin, can you hear us?
I don't know who's this phone number. I don't know who's this phone number.
Kevin, can you hear us? Wait. It's here. Okay, now you can. How about now? Yeah, we can't hear you real well, but we'll deal with it. Okay, so the chairman's instructions to staff is figure that out and come back with a CSM or a conservation easement change that will allow for drain time, so that there'll be an outlet for that pond, and hopefully that will alleviate the big problem. Okay, Mr. City Engineer.
I thought they lived somewhere else, so can you verify exactly which addresses those two residents were?
Directly west, 12301 West Bryan Road.
So you are across the We Energies path area? You're where the post, no west.
We're over there.
Right there.
Right there, okay. And then the lady that spoke.
I am directly east.
You're directly east. So we got.
Over, yeah. I have a pond
No,
in my
it's-
property too.
Right there.
Down.
You got two properties on either side, and both are flooded, as the testimony. So which way is the general flow? I mean, how can, I guess I'm a little confused on the drainage patterns. How can both sides of the property be flooded? And it kind of floods north, right? It flooded, and it kind of floods north, right?
You're the expert.
Oh, wait. Okay, we're not doing that, all right?
So, I guess, somebody asked the applicant, how does the drainage patterns from those two properties, how do they flow so that, I understand, how do they flow so that, I understand, it would make sense that maybe one of their properties might be affected by your situation, but I understand how both on either side of you are affected by the fill that was placed in this property.
Well, historically, in the pre-fill condition, drainage went both east and west.
So, okay, so let's start with that. So before there was any fill from the DOT project, which I'll go on the record as saying we were frustrated from day one because of the state's going to bypass a lot of city rules, so before the fill was placed, how was the drainage pattern?
There's a ridge that goes right through the middle of the site, and half the property drains east, half the property drains west.
So you're on the uphill side for both properties?
The wetlands kind of indicate it too. I mean, that's where water is draining from the site, is going to, the pond is obviously a low spot, and then that wetland complex that goes through the We Energies corridor is a low point as well.
So the fact that there's, I mean, you haven't added a parking lot, you haven't added those kinds of things. So,
No.
the volume of water should not have changed. As they said something, made something click. There is something, so we've been looking a lot at the pathway. We are a little concerned on that since it doesn't make sense.
Okay, I want to clear something up right now, because the Plan Commission operates under specific rules and specific regulations by the state that govern public hearings. We don't have citizen comment period because we have public, as you saw tonight, testimony by the public. Offering additional testimony by the public outside of a public hearing is not fair to the public who can't be here. That's why we're done. So it's not me being mean, it's just we're done. So it's not me being mean, it's just we don't allow that.
So the rest of my comments to the applicant. So I do appreciate the fact that drain tiles break. We've got all over that area. And Mr. Haley's well familiar with that area. And Mr. Haley's well familiar with the situation across from his house. You know, there's a private drain tile that breaks and he caused the backup. I appreciate that. So anything we can do to alleviate the drainage, if so as far as the wetland issues, I would be very much in favor of, if you will. So as far as the wetland issues, I would be very much in favor of, if you will, violating the wetland buffers and so forth to fix the drainage. I think drainage is a huge concern that there is, not just these folks here, but I have heard about some other folks in the area that said, you know, drainage is worse than it's ever been. And we've been looking a lot at that because of the trail issues. Since ever been. And we've been looking a lot at that because of the trail issues. So for what that's worth, I would fully support being able to fix the tile going through there. But I'm not sure how you could fix it and guarantee that it would stay up fixed unless you replace the entire tile. Replace the entire tile.
Commissioner, questions? All right,
Haley.
now we're gonna have to figure out how to take care of you. All right,
Haley.
now we're gonna have to figure out how to take care of you, Kevin. Hold on one second. I don't even know where it's coming out. Kevin, see?
Is that white?
Kevin, say something. All right, let's try this. Go ahead and speak loudly. Let's try this. Go ahead and speak loudly.
Yes, sir.
That's kind of okay.
My concerns are general. We want to improve this development. It concerns me, just like with the next item on the agenda, that we improve these developments and then we'll come back later and tell us how they're going to be within known natural resources on the site. Okay, I don't about this development per se, but when it was presented to us, that everything is beautiful. Now we're back looking at we can add to the natural resources. Like protection, the drainage, that's the function better. Yes, we will have to deal with the changes on site and this construction. But when all of a sudden we start giving them exemptions against protecting these natural resources, that's when we get ourselves into trouble. There's problems out there, the more come. So I have no objection to this development. But the issue is, why should we allow them to destroy, disturb other natural resources on the site? They should just figure out a way to work with it and make it all be happy. Staff originally made they do various efforts to remove invasive species and in essence make things better. But for some reason all of that went away. And now we're just looking at an issue where, okay, after we've already approved it, it's too late. Now they want to impact additional natural resources and believe that it's necessary. it's a big enough site, they should be able to make it work and stay away from the natural resources. It's unfortunate that the state chooses to exert their muscle and move in and do it. But at the same time, the city should be diligent in protecting impacts to our natural. The city should be diligent in protecting impacts to our natural resources. We have policies. The state still has to live by them. We couldn't stop the fact that they stored materials out there, but we could have ensured that they didn't have impacts. Now, whether they did or whether they didn't is all debatable. Now, whether they did or whether they didn't is all debatable. All I'm trying to say is there ought to be a way that we move forward with this development as proposed to us without further impacting the natural resources. This area is low, it's wet, it's in and west to the western edge of the property, it's wet, it's in and west to the western edge of the property, and if you have any impacts on that, impacts everything. Let's just not do it. Let's let the developer figure out a way to work within the parameters that are given and make this work without impacting additional natural resources.
Mr. Moore.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cody.
Could I have staff further elaborate on the environmental commission's recommendations? So it sounded like they took away the surety requirement that you proposed. Let's start with that one. Can you explain why they took that away?
Thank you. So the original recommended condition of approval was a recommendation to Plan Commission to the Common Council. Plan Commission can require financial sureties for restoration under the UDO. You can elaborate on about the extent of what would be required, and so they deleted that recommendation. It is a condition that Plan Commission can choose to recommend and impose. So it comes to this body whether or not you would actually like to, but they did not include it as a recommended condition.
So if I could paraphrase that.
Recommended financial surety for restoration of the site, restoration of the impacts. So when we go to develop the site, at some point, we're going to be posting a letter of credit for the restoration of the site. That's part of, so I guess I wouldn't object if there's an idea of surety right now, but usually that's calculated at the time you have a grading plan and you've calculated how many square yards. The whole site is going to be covered under a surety for stabilization and restoration. So that was my point at environmental and restoration. So that was my point at Environmental Commission, is that the surety is going to come at the time of the development.
And there was a second recommendation, Environmental Commission, could you elaborate on?
So the recommendation that was deleted. So staff recommended a condition of approval as remedy for the impacts to the site or the result of spill, which was placed without any requests related to those impacts. So they had the permitting process but didn't request those impacts. As remedy, staff suggested an option of providing restoration for the impacted wetlands 1 and 2 on that property, removal of invasive species, So they deleted that condition.
And replaced it with?
It was just deleted. They revised the language of the condition requiring restoration of wetland setbacks to be a little more specific about native of the ordinances that turf grasses are prohibited, and that native plantings are allowed, and they have a preference for that. But otherwise did not recommend restoration as remedy.
So we'll see native plantings in the process. Native plantings is part of the plan.
Well, for the applicant, so impacts to the wetland setback and buffer, they have to go back and fix the condition of those grading impacts, and so there are recommended seed mixes. So.
Boil things down and get to the the bottom so we can get to some resolution. And as I look at this, the main issue is the 1,100 square feet of the impact of the buffer.
Setback.
Or the setback, I'm sorry. Setback. Look at the drawing, on the farthest south building, we're probably impacting, just to suggest, probably 250 square feet on the pad size. The building north of that is the biggest one, probably 354. Building north of that is the biggest one, probably 354 square feet. And the one farthest north, probably 250 square feet of the pad size. We don't know if the building is coming anywhere near that.
We don't, and we also don't know that we also don't know that we're going to need as much grading temporary impacts to the buffer as we're showing on the plan, because we really need this natural resource special exception to feel comfortable about moving forward with a design for the site. Until we get past this point, feel comfortable about moving forward with a design for the site. Until we get past this point, this is shown as worst case scenario. I mean, we know there's going to be rear yard storm sewer. We know there's going to be a certain amount of grading, but we have to show as much as we can to make sure we're safe that we don't go through this again. I want to say that I can to make sure we're safe that we don't go through this again. I want to say that I feel this is worst case scenario, and those permanent impacts on the building pads. If you look at the existing topo of the site, we're up on the tabletop. We're not going towards the wetland. I mean, this is up on top of the site. So the impacts, permanent impacts to the wetland setback that area has already been impacted.
And I understand that. But we're here because of our regulations that want to protect that, the cat we have, right? So that's why we do this. I'm wondering if there's a different way you could do this, Dan, where you could do your engineering and come back and tell us, yeah, we're not going to impact the buffer.
So we've talked with, and partner builders. I've reduced the building pad as much as I possibly can to accommodate product. I guess in discussions with the Environmental Commission, there is a way to not impact any of this. And it's contrary to what we heard at.
I don't understand what you just said.
We can do two-story multifamily buildings under that zoning district and be away from the buffer. What we're trying to do is follow the direction that we received at the concept review, where it was owner-occupied condominiums.
You wouldn't build a two-story condominium?
No, these are all planned as ranch condominiums.
That's not what I asked. I said you wouldn't build
I would not, because what we're, again, this is a complicated matter, but we're trying to maximize the value on this site. If we do two-story townhomes, we're not going to accomplish that.
For those of you with the map out there, what we're talking about are the blue hatched areas on the building pads. And we'll show you on the building pads. And we'll show you in this image. Mr. City Engineer.
Could I suggest that not all of them have to be two-story, you only need a few of them need to be two-story? Make it look a little less like a track home where everything looks the same. Less like a track home where everything looks the same. I'm still concerned about drainage, but that's related, not related.
If it would help, these pads are shown without any articulation. There's going to be cuts, ins and outs on these pads. If we can move forward with the temporary impacts and the buffers and come to a halfway point on the permanent impacts and the setback, I'm sure halfway point on the permanent impacts in the setback, I'm sure we could do that through architecture. But what's really important, what's really key to this project is the temporary impacts that are shown in green there.
And I guess I'm saying the temporary impacts don't bother me. And I guess I'm saying the temporary impacts don't bother me. Because if they go back, and I'm okay with that. It's the long-term stability of the drainage system, make sure we have as much storage as we can. And the big thing is let's get water to move away from it. The big thing is let's get water to move away from where it's standing.
Yeah, as we move forward, we're going to be following DNR requirements as well, as far as getting close to those. The impact. We can't drain directly into the wetlands. We can't do that. All the stormwater from the road, the roofs, is going to be tied into a storm sewer that's going to go to these engineered ponds and then released over time. So my thought is that the best way to clear up this drainage situation is to develop the site with a storm sewer.
I don't know, I disagree with that. I need to get down.
So we're in a kind of a spot where we're trying to show a project that works, and I think a project that works can be designed to alleviate the issues that were, the drainage issues.
Push your button. That's not your button, that's your, okay.
Thank you. So if I might rephrase that, we're saying that the storm sewer that you're intending to put into this property would be engineered in such a way that it would be more helpful to the adjacent residents.
I would agree with that, but I'm not going to, I can't say that the drainage problems that are happening that were referenced tonight have to do with this property. So, to answer your question, I think with grading, with rear storm sewer, engineered storm system, we can minimize the drainage that's going east and west at a rate that's more acceptable.
So, where do we go from here? Without approving the permanent impacts? Make it easy.
Well, you can recommend approval of what you have, or you can recommend approval of what you have, or you can put it on a table, make them come back with engineered drawings. And you may not have any permanent impacts anyway, and then you're just dealing with the temporary impacts.
The problem here is I need some level of confidence to design the site. The problem here is I need some level of confidence to design the site. Without this NRSE, we can't move forward. I mean, without knowing that we can't grade within that buffer, that we can't install utilities in the back in those green areas, I can't agree to that.
I'm not sure that you heard anybody say that you can't have temporary impacts.
Is this just permanent?
We're talking about the permanent part.
Oh, permanent. Yeah, I can agree. Sure. So we're really down to the 1,300 square feet of permanent impact. I'm sure we can design these pads around that. I mean, it's not ideal, but I'll give it my best shot. And if we could run into a jam where we would notch out a corner of the building, do some.
That's where I was going earlier. It's like put a square there. Maybe the house isn't the square. I'm going to do this section and all of them.
Can I summarize the direction that I'm hearing develop?
Sure.
So the revised request for temporary buffer impacts, temporary setback impacts, meeting the restoration requirements of UDO for those. And there are no proposed setback permanent impacts now, or do you want to maintain that?
There's a path forward, Dan, if you say yes, that's correct.
Yes. The only, what I would want to, there was one clarification that was brought up earlier about temporary impacts in the wetland setback. And so the wetland setback per 15 wetland setback. And so the wetland setback per 15.4-0102, wetland setbacks are not a protected natural resource feature and they're allowed to be impacted, provided you restore that. And we're agreeing to that. And we're agreeing to that.
And thank you, Ms. X, because that was what I was just going to try to get at. So thank you for clarifying that succinctly. So I'm looking at ways to word this. So I'm looking at ways to word this motion such that it is only for the temporary setback.
Changes as proposed by the social plan.
Okay.
Changes as proposed by the social plan.
Okay. Then I will move to recommend approval of the Stephen R. Mills President of Fair Development LLC natural resource features special exception pursuant to the standards, findings, and decision recommended by the Plan Commission and condition recommendations, subject to the changes and conditions that were just recommended by Ms. X.
Is that okay, Mary?
Yes, I just want to draw the commission's intent boulders to demarcate the wetland setback. So, and then the technical corrections, et cetera. So you're familiar with this document, but that was not called out.
Where are all those conditions?
On the draft standards, findings, and decisions on that page. The second one that was discussed.
Page 7 of the report, of the draft standards. If city attorney indicates that's coming from the commission.
Yes.
Condition D says boulders or other markers. Are you guys, is everyone good with that?
So I can second that motion. Was there one?
Yes. So, for those of you who know, no permanent impacts are part of this motion. This motion is allowed to go forward and the engineer don't have any permanent impacts that buffer. Good. If they do, you got to come back. Okay. And then relative to the others, well, let's act on this now. All right, there's a motion on the floor to approve subject to conditions outlined by all. And a second by Commissioner Moore. All those in favor of that motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Discussion. Point of order.
Well, point of order doesn't work because we already voted. But
How can you call a vote without commission members to comment? A second is always followed by
By
an
discussion.
opportunity for members to comment.
that's correct. I'm going to subject myself to criticism by the public, but I'm going to ask Commissioner Haley to go ahead.
My point is really simple in all this. We understand what's going on in the site. There are challenges. There are things to be done. Franklin chooses to protect its natural resources. We have a standing policy. Exceptions can be allowed. And my previous recommendations is that if a developer seeks exceptions to our natural resources, it's not a given. It should be done with deliberation. But more importantly, there should be some give back. There should be some way, as we said earlier, that the site ends up better in the long run. And staff report that prior to the meeting of the Environmental Commission, staff recommended a condition that applicants shall provide for removal of invasive species. All I'm asking for is that they mitigate the impacts that they will have. I understand they may or may not happen, but there are ways, and yes, they may be somewhat minor impacts, but they still aren't treated. They come at the cost of improving natural resources. And that's all I'm asking for. That what the Environmental Commission originally looked at was, that all makes sense. That should be the cost of entry, yet an exception to our rules. The exceptions are not the standard. The standard is no, don't touch them. If we want to let them touch them, there must be some form of mitigation. So I'm okay with granting these, but I need the developer to step forward in good faith and show us a way that when it's all said and done, things end up better. Not just as good, or maybe as good, or maybe it's short term, maybe it's long term. What are maybe it's good, or maybe it's short term, maybe it's long term? What are they going to do on site to enhance the wetlands and the natural resources so that they can do their job in the future? That's all I'm asking for here.
Okay, we can deal with that. So
Let's
okay. So the motion was made and seconded and voted on. I did not ask for nays yet.
Motion made and seconded, and you pushed the vote without any discussion by the commission.
That's correct.
Any discussion by the commission.
That's correct.
And I did not vote.
That's correct. Well, I didn't know that you didn't vote, but I'm going to ask now for nays. Any opposed?
Yes, as it stands, nay.
Okay, because I'm gonna offer you a fix to your issue here in a second. So, but your vote is recorded as a no. So with that,
My vote is recorded as a no based on the way that the motion stands right now.
That's fine.
In the language about remediator there, then I think it's a fair option.
I got it. It's okay. Okay, the motion carries 5 ayes, 1 no, no abstentions. Commissioner Haley, you have a follow-on motion about restoration of natural resources?
Yes, I would like the applicant be responsible for removal of invasive species and restoration of natural wetland species in wetlands 1 and 2, and that the application shall provide for the financial assurance. That's not my biggest concern. My biggest concern is that they do something to enhance the improvement than just a bunch of filled wetlands.
Okay, so your motion is to remove invasive species from the 2 wetlands and 2 wetlands?
Can I talk about this, or?
No.
Is there a second to that?
I'll say.
We also have another issue on the motion.
So we talked about this at Environmental Commission, and I resisted the condition back then, mainly on the point that I'm not asking for any wetland impacts in this whole thing. I mean, there is not 1 square foot of wetland impacts in this whole thing. I mean, there is not 1 square foot of wetland impact that we're asking for. But on the other hand, the motion that's being proposed is a motion or an idea to remove invasive species and rehabilitate wetlands without any kind of standards, without any talk about who's going to monitor it, who's going to be, am I doing a good job, a bad job? And then most importantly, this property is bisected by 2 easements, one by ATC that goes through there every 6 months, and another one by We Energies that goes and clears their easements. So if I go and restore a wetland, there is no way that I can say in here in good faith that I'm going to perform on that condition. So I can't say that we can perform a wetland rehabilitation and removing invasive species on those wetlands, because it would be, I would rather put the same amount of money into something else. Task.
So what would that something else be?
Helping out with the trail connection, which we've offered. Offering easements to connect the trail. I mean, name it, we'll do it, but just what I'm asking for is this, the idea of control 100% is not something that's money well spent. And plus, we did not impact the wetland, and we're not asking for any wetland impact.
Okay. The other issue I have with the motion is it defines that there's financial surety without defining what that financial surety is. So we can leave it alone, and if the commission so desires to decline the motion and start over again, or it's whatever. Got questions? Commissioner Moore.
So I can't say that I've been out there and walked your site boundary to boundary. They're pretty much, because I only went out there and filled the site. It pretty much took up the entire site. And I know what the part over by the trail looks like. It wasn't quite a bit about the one we took out. It would be nice to know that the city's not the only one out there removing buckthorn. We get criticized a lot for removing trees.
I can.
We get criticized a lot for removing trees.
I will work on buckthorn because it can be controlled. What I can't say is invasive species. There's a bunch of invasive species. Reed canary grass is in every wetland in Wisconsin. I cannot say that I can remove.
I'm not worried about
in Wisconsin. I cannot say that I can remove.
I'm not worried about. Yeah, wetlands tend to grow. You can. It's my personal feeling is you can violate setbacks because they're going to come back. They got there somehow. They're going to continue to encroach on whatever they can. Well, I guess the question is, we'd rather see money spent wherever they can. Well, I guess the question is, we'd rather see money spent somewhere else. I still would like to go back to that pond. I'd like to see more money put into trying to drain that pond so we can get the neighbors and everyone else to
absolutely
much better.
100%.
Commissioner Haley, it's your motion.
100%.
Commissioner Haley, it's your motion.
It's my motion and it stands. If the developer wants to make an additional offer of what they might do, all I'm saying is we are allowing them to impact wetlands. We are allowing them to impact wetlands or natural areas. It's not just about wetlands. Our ordinances say that they're protected. They've come to us and said, can we possibly encroach on them? And all I'm saying is that if they're going to encroach on them and have the impact, all I'm saying is that if they're going to encroach on them and have the impact contrary or standing ordinances, there ought to be something that they can do to make the world a better place. And the pond is all good and it's all something. I just keep hearing the developer saying, well, we don't want to do anything, we just want to encroach on them. Just hearing the developer saying, well, we don't want to do anything, we just want to encroach on them, just let me be and everything will be fine. My comment is, this is the future of Franklin. This subdivision, development, whatever you want to call it, it should be better off 5 years from now than it is now. And just putting houses on it doesn't make a difference than it is now. And just putting houses on it doesn't make a difference. I would like to think that the developer will be interested in putting forward a quality project that is sensitive to the environment. It gives something for Franklin to be proud of. And that's all I'm saying. I'm not objecting to them encroaching in it. I think a long time ago we approved this plan. But unfortunately it didn't come up until now. So all I'm saying is we have ordinances that protect these areas. We can make an exception to allow them to potentially impact them. That should come with a give back to the city, to the natural environment. The edge of the site is a very unique wetland. It's not just Reed canary grass, and I'm not going to get into it all. It's a very unique wetland. It probably doesn't need a lot of effort, but it needs some love rather than just bulldozing into it or putting a house into the corner.
Okay, Kevin, we need to be clear because there's encroaching on any wetlands or wetlands setbacks. The proposal was to encroach on a, Kevin, sorry, but trying to be clear. But you're saying things that are incorrect.
And forgive me if that's incorrect. My point is, It's not given. We protect these areas for a reason. And all I'm asking is that they give back in some way. Once they develop these lots and sell them off, they're gone. Nobody cares what happens. Maybe the drainage problem, maybe the wet area will get better. Will get better. How can they make this a better development? And I would think that the developer would be happy to do that. I understand it costs money. It's not easy. But the reason that we have the ordinances that protect these areas is so that they're not impacted. They're asking for these areas is so that they're not impacted. They're asking for an exception. And with an exception can come conditions. And my conditions will stand. We can go on. I'm not going to argue this anymore. I'm getting tired of this issue where we approve plan and then 6-9 months later, issue where we approve plan and then 6-9 months later they come back and say, oh, but in order to do our plan the way we want, we have to have these impacts to natural areas. We have ordinances for a reason. I'm asking them to comply with them or deal with the conditions that we place on them or deal with the conditions that we place on them in order to get a positive development for Franklin.
Okay, so the motion will stand. Just to be clear again, the motion that we previously approved provides for temporary impacts to the buffer, not buffer. Nobody's answered yes, buffer. To the buffer only, temporary, restored to its original condition. There is no impacts to the wetlands, no impacts to the setback. So, we got
Move on.
Commissioner Leon. Hold on a second. This is no second.
So I seconded Commissioner Haley's motion. I believe the applicant offered a good alternative in discussion with the chairman. So although I second, because I think a good alternative is there that would meet the spirit of what Commissioner Haley is discussing. And if Commissioner Haley were willing to, were amenable to that, to change his motion, I would be, I think there's a better option, so I would oppose it. Should Commissioner Haley want to go forward as is?
How would you, as I amended?
Commissioner Haley, what was that?
I asked, how would he recommend that I amend my motion?
Let me try this. Let's do this a little more cleanly. You can withdraw your second with the permission of the body, and then the motion will ask for another second to it, and then the motion will die if it doesn't get a second. Commissioner Haley can withdraw his motion with permission of the body. Commissioner Haley can withdraw his motion with permission of the body, and then we can do a different motion. So it's whatever the two of you decide you want to do. It doesn't matter to me.
I'm going to defer to Commissioner Haley because I think he was asking what. I'm going to defer to Commissioner Haley because I think he was asking what the applicant's alternative to Commissioner Haley's proposal is. Do I understand that right, Commissioner Haley? You want to understand the applicant's alternative at this point?
Yes, I did not hear a clear alternative. I heard yes, I did not hear a clear alternative. I heard a lot of, I don't want to do this. What are they willing to do?
Okay, let's do this. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Any opposed?
No.
Pretty clear. Pretty clear. Motion dies. Motion fails. 6 ayes, no noes, no absent, no abstention. Okay. Further action. Commissioner Leon.
If, for the purpose of the record, if the applicant could restate.
Wait a second. Okay. Get you. You're all in hand.
I think the vote total was reversed on that. It was no ayes, 6 noes.
You are so good. I incorrectly announced that it was, I'm used to affirmative votes. The vote was no ayes, 6 noes, no absence, no abstentions. So, anything more, Commissioner Leon? I said it wrong. I said that it passed.
Yeah, did Commissioner Haley vote aye?
I got your vote correct, did I?
My vote on what?
On the motion, on the original motion, did you vote aye or nay?
I voted aye.
Okay, so my announcement is again incorrect. The correct vote on Commissioner Haley's motion was 1 aye, 5 no.
I will ask the applicant to restate your alternative to Commissioner Haley's proposal. See if there's a motion on that.
Okay. Okay, so with all due respect, we provided a wetland delineation. I have not, I was prepared to bargain. We'll provide a trail easement through the site. We will address the pond issue, which is not even on this property. And we'll participate to some extent on buck.
So could I ask for clarification on the trail through the site? Because we did have a conversation on how to fit a trail through the site. And the resolution we came to was that there was absolutely no room to put a trail through the site.
How about we rephrase that? We will feasible through the site. We are open to finding a solution for a trail through the site. But I thought we could go through, I thought you were going to run down the We Energies easement, come to the west of that wetland, and then hook down to Highway 45, and we're more than willing to cooperate with that.
All right, this is getting a little much. Forget the trail easement, because that's a whole other conversation. Commissioner Leon.
So, yeah, and my concern was less to do with that trail easement than it was for the pond remediation and the buckthorn removal. Because I believe that pond remediation would address it. But so, I'm going to try and say this well. I make a motion that as a condition of this approval, that the applicant do as stated for the pond remediation and the buck.
Remediation is the right word.
We were going to cooperate. I want to make sure. I don't want to promise anything that I can't deliver. Right. So can I say that we're going to cooperate to our greatest extent on resolving any pond issue?
I think that's probably still too big. So we're talking about this 100 feet, 200 feet of it?
Sure. I mean, I'm prepared to replace the tile from the pond edge to Ryan Road. I need the city to release the conservation easement for me to do that work. And then I will participate in buckthorn removal, but I'm telling you right now, I don't know how to participate in buckthorn removal.
I am concerned about releasing the conservation. I think a revised easement would be more appropriate.
$3.
And let's protect everybody here. The value on the buckthorn removal. You're going to do that yourself, though, right? Or are you going to have a contractor?
No, we're going to have a contractor.
All right. 10 grand?
Sure.
10 grand, Commissioner Lee?
10 grand for buckthorn removal participation. 10 grand for buckthorn removal participation.
We will do
minimum.
We're going to do buckthorn removal as part of our site development at a value to at least $10,000.
So,
With at least $10,000.
so,
To city engineers, say for the 100 to 200 feet of discharge.
he said he would go all the way to Ryan.
All the way to Ryan Road.
You want me to do it?
You would place it on the block.
All right. You want me to do it?
You would place it on the block.
All right. As a condition of the prior approval, the developer agrees to provide a minimum of $10,000 value in buckthorn removal the keyword is minimum, and provide repair of an outflow pipe from the pond located at the adjacent parcel completely to Ryan Road.
I just want to make sure that if we're going to do this pond thing, that I just want to make sure that if we're going to do this pond thing, that I need your guys'
Subject to the revised conservation easement, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
So moved.
And I'll second that with noting that we just spent $17,000 tree with buckthorn on about 20 acres. $17,000 tree with buckthorn on about 20 acres for water park.
And it looks good. Okay, questions on the motion? Commissioner Haley?
I would just ask that be less specific about buckthorn removal. And focus on the basics. Include buckthorn in each paragraph of the thing. Let's not use it one problem.
Commissioner Haley is asking that motion be expanded to add to the buckthorn and the word invasive species. All right, so that's been accepted by the maker and the second.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Leon does not do that. So let's go and vote. Any other questions? Okay, storm removal and outflow pipe subject to this revised conservation easement to Ryan Road. On that motion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Kevin? So your vote is no.
My vote is aye.
Oh, okay, good. I couldn't hear you. So thank you. So it's 6 ayes, no noes, no abstentions. Okay, any other action on this item? Please say no. Okay. With that, we move on to the next item. Which is rezoning and certified survey maps. We have a public hearing notice on the rezoning. Mr. Ed. Please.
City of Franklin Planning Commission will hold a public hearing on Thursday, January 20, 2022 at 7 p.m. in the Common Council Chambers of the Franklin City Hall, 9229 West Loomis Road, Franklin, Wisconsin 53132. To take public comments regarding an application by Stephen R. Mills, President of Bear Development LLC, on property owned by Loomis and Ryan Incorporated and Gurjit, President of Bear Development LLC, on property owned by Loomis and Ryan Incorporated and Gurjit Singh and Gurmit Kaur, to request approval of an ordinance to amend the Unified Development Ordinance zoning map to rezone a certain parcel of land from M1 Limited Industrial District and R2 Estate Single Family Residence District to M1 Limited Industrial District on parcels identified as tax district to M1 Limited Industrial District on parcels identified as tax key numbers 891108400 and 89389994004, otherwise known as Lot 2 of the concurrent certified survey map. This public hearing is being held pursuant to the requirements of Section 62.23 subsection 7D2 of the Wisconsin statutes and Division 15-9.0200 of the City of Franklin Unified Development Ordinance. A map showing the property effective, full legal description, the application, and all supporting materials are available for review and may be obtained from the City Clerk by way of request to the Department of City Development at Franklin City Hall, 9229 West Loomis Road, Franklin, Wisconsin 53132 during normal business hours. A copy of the proposed ordinance in draft form is available and open for inspection by the public in the office of the City Clerk at Franklin City Hall, same address, during normal business hours. Public is invited to attend the public hearing and provide.
So we have a properly noticed public hearing. You guys do this to me all the time. Mr. Rivera.
Martinez.
Okay. Mr. Martinez, you have.
Good evening, Regular Martinez, City Development Department. So the previous application was here. Now we're crossing Loomis, enter the Ryan Meadows subdivision, and we're talking about these two properties. The total area is about 56 acres. So we have one property that is partly zoned industrial. And we have the other property that is outside the Ryan Meadows subdivision and is currently zoned residential R2 with an area that is zoned C1 conservancy that is mostly wetlands area. So what is being proposed is, one is the certified survey map that will reconfigure these two properties from 2 to 3. So lot 1 will be around here. It will be approximately 9 acres. It will remain zoned and as industrial. Just for reference, the minimum area for industrial for N1 lot is half acre. This will be 9 acres. Lot number 2 will be approximately here, and it will have an area of approximately 22 acres. I will explain more detail about an area of approximately 22 acres. I will explain more detail about that one. And lot 3 will be this area south of this wetlands, and will be about 20 acres and will remain zoned as residential. So zoned as residential. So this is more detail, the 3 lots. So lot number 1, it has an easement. It's the same wind energy easement that will go north to the Boontown property that we discussed previously. So, other than the easement, there is no other restriction, no natural resources on lot number 1, and it has access to the new streets, Chicory and Monarch Drive. Lot number 2, you have some wetlands area. This wetland here in the south is already protected by a conservation easement as part of the Ryan Meadows subdivision. This wetland here is delineated, but the easement has not been recorded, and there is another wetland here. This area, there is approximately 8 acres. The applicant is proposed to rezone to industrial. So lot number 2 will be industrial. Lot number 3 here, you have some wetlands will remain zoned as residential. The proposed property line will be approximately on the wetland. Lot number 3 will have access from 112th Street, so it will not have access through the Ryan Meadows subdivision, and it has this area here that is basically isolated by the wetlands. So the applicant is proposing to rezone to industrial, but no proposed impacts at this time to any natural resources at this time. So just more detail on the lot 2, lot number 1. Lot 1, 2, and 3. The area to be rezoned, just a comment about the rezoning. It is because this is the area to be rezoned. So the purple is the business park. So the proposed zoning district, the N1 limited industrial, is consistent with the future land use map. Compatibility with adjacent land uses. So to the north, this is residential, but it's really an easement for mature woodland. So no development is intended here. To the east, this is some residential, but there is a proposed 20-foot trail easement that will act like a buffer between the industrial and the residential. And to the south, it's the residential and the industrial. So staff is not anticipated any impact to the adjacent residential areas. Staff is recommending approval. Just one note that staff recommends a condition that is in the resolution, that is that the applicant needs to concurrently with the recording of the certified survey map. The applicant is requesting to change that, to remove that condition, so they can record the CSM and they will do the conservation easement later when they present an application for a site plan, for an actual development.
Back up one slide.
Actual development.
Back up one slide. 2 slides. Okay. We're going to have a conversation about these maps. because I defy anyone in the audience to tell us what's getting rezoned. Because it's just not clear. This is M1. Because it's just not clear. This is M1.
Right.
This is R2. This lot and this lot are what we're talking about. As a new CSM and rezoning. So there's a new CSM and rezoning. So this area is staying R2.
Right.
The Conservancy is staying.
Right.
But this area is changing from R2 to manufacturing to match this zoning.
Right.
Manufacturing to match this zoning.
Right.
Okay. I'm doing this on purpose. Because the maps are, if you back up a map, no, the color. You can't tell anything from that one and this one either. This one appears that one and this one either. This one appears that the entire area is getting rezoned to M1. And it's not.
Because that's the two current properties. Yeah.
I get it. But this does not help people in the audience. But this does not help people in the audience. So showing this map, this area here is going to be split off with a certified survey map and become manufacturing to match this one. This one's staying on.
Correct.
So it's lot 1, lot 2.
Correct.
So it's lot 1, lot 2, lot 3.
Correct.
Okay. So I hope that made it more clear. Commissioner Leon's got to look at the space. Commissioner Leon.
I'll go on record saying that was very clear to me from not only this map, but the following map and the way that Mr. Martinez described it. No, very clear.
Then why did you look at me confused?
Because
I was confused. You deal with this all a lot? Constituents. So anyway, okay. So we have a properly noticed public hearing. We've had staff report. Mr. Schott, you want to add anything before we open the public hearing?
Not before the public hearing.
All right, with that, I will open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on this matter, this does not require...
Street candidate for District 1 alderperson. Do you want me to raise my hand?
No, you're good.
I want to know why. It's hard to evaluate the appropriateness of this zoning change without knowing what the use is. Who's interested in this property?
Who is we?
Oh, I'm going to speak for myself, but there are other neighbors, but I don't need to reference them without it. I understand. But we all know that people that live not far from there have been really uncomfortable with, besides myself, with some of the other industrial uses that have come up. And so we want to, and are we stuck with whatever industry wants to come in there? We'd like to know that it's something that's not going to affect air quality or water quality or general quality of life, especially with all the neighbors that will be moving into that subdivision. So that's my question, why? And I'd rather we not approve it until we understand why. Thanks.
Mr. Martinez.
Just to clarify, there's no proposed use at this time, but just to make a difference between the N1 that is the limited industrial district and the N2 that is the general industrial district. So the N1 is basically for industrial uses that are conducted indoor, and the N2 may allow for industrial uses that are outdoor. For example, the N2 allow for copper, and the N2 will allow for like warehouses. The N1, sorry, for warehouses that are, and the N2 will allow for like warehouses. The N1, sorry, for warehouses that are indoor. Just to clarify.
A month or so ago, the Common Council had a concept review for a use of a warehouse condominium.
Accelerator building.
Warehouse condominium.
Accelerator building.
Accelerated incubator.
Incubator.
For small businesses. which may be coming forward at some future time. Anyone else wishing to speak? Yes, ma'am, good evening. Yes, ma'am, good evening.
Good evening. I'm Amy Seraphin. I live at 9951 South 112. So my property is the two boxes here. Yes. Yep. So I have the back border to this property that is under review. I would like to, first of all, I'm part of the we that she's talking about. So there is a we. I am concerned about the change, particularly also about the trail being used as the buffer. Change from residential to M1, there is a required amount of buffer. And it sounds like, regardless of what, and it sounds like we want to also add a bike trail into that required buffer. So property, because I have two, instead of just getting the buffer, I'm getting a bike trail. So that's one of my concerns. And then the other thing that I would just like everybody to consider is when you look at how the uses are, everybody lives there. So even though they're saying Ryan Meadows Outlot, which is R1, is not going to be a residence, and so therefore that person wouldn't be affected by this change. These two people, myself, and then the property next to mine are already developed, and we've been on 112. The property next to mine are already developed, and we've been on 112 before any of this began. I also would like to make the comment that, and I have a video which maybe I should submit or show you guys, that we've already had a lot of water issues. There is a storm sewer that runs along 112 that we're not connected to, but it's right, there's a cap on it on my property. And in 2019, water was coming out of that storm sewer, which I do have the video of. And this wetland area that borders my property swelled way into my property. So if we rezone this M1 and you put a bunch of more concrete down, the swelling is going to be even greater. And so I do have pictures and a video of that on my phone. I don't know how you want me to submit that. Just bring it over here? Okay.
But I would encourage you to meet with the city engineer at some point tomorrow or whatever, or hang around later.
Okay.
But yes,
I'd
we
like
need
to
to see
show
that,
you
because that's
that so you
important
can
to make
see
sure.
how, yeah, because water should never come out of a storm drain. And that's the video that clearly shows it. That's our change this. We put more concrete down, and now the people that are already there have even more issues because there's less place for the water to infiltrate. Thank you.
Now, this is all good information, appreciate it, but it's not for the rezoning, but it's good information for us to plan for something that might get approved there. So that's good. So please meet with the city engineer about the water.
Okay.
So that's,
Actually, if you want to come in maybe Tuesday, my assistant would probably be good to meet with you, and he's out the office out tomorrow and Monday. So if you want to come in maybe Tuesday,
Okay.
3 and 5.
Okay.
great, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Anyone else? Okay, then I'll close the public hearing on this matter. Mr. Martin.
Just to clarify that the Unified Development Ordinance require buffer between an industrial zoning and a residential zoning. What is being buffer between an industrial zoning and a residential zoning, what is being proposed in this case is the trade lease in lieu of the buffer.
That's my problem.
But this is not the end of the story. Right. I mean, right. I mean, right. Sure, you have your hand up.
I didn't right now. I thought the applicant would have some comments before it was being open to.
Sure. Dan Shop, Fair Development, 4011 80th Street, Kenosha, Wisconsin. 4011 80th Street, Kenosha, Wisconsin, on behalf of Loomis and Ryan. Tonight we are the contract purchasers for the acreage proposed to be rezoned. We do have a end user for the site. We're very excited to bring a site plan forward for a use that arguably is not industrial. I don't classify it as industrial. It's some kind of no manufacturing soft use in an M1 district. We're excited about bringing a site plan forward. In order for us to, it is designated as business park on the comprehensive plan, and that's the only guide that we have. So we feel our zoning request is consistent with the plan. We need to create a legal parcel, and that's what the CSM is proposing to do. We're reconfiguring our property, which is known as Lot 84, into a different shape and orientation. Lot 3 will continue to be owned by Mr. Singh. It's zoned R2. We're looking forward to working with the city and staff on how to, work on the site for the, to protect the neighbors for sure. We reviewed the draft, the ordinance for the no issues whatsoever. The resolution for the CSM, I would ask, similar that's been done before on past projects, is that we would like to submit the conservation easement prior to the issuance of a building permit or a grading permit, because we have a lot of work to do here regarding site plan approval, and unfortunately we have submitted for a natural resource special exception.
The resolution that you have in your hands is as recommended by staff that requires the conservation easement to be recorded with the CSM, and the applicant is requesting to defer that prior to obtaining building or rate permit.
And once again, Mr. Shop, why do you want it then, not now?
Well, here's the thing. When we look at the resolution or the conditions, or where is it regulated? One of the regulations that binds us says that within 180 days we have to record the CSM. I'm not sure we're going to be in a position, or if I don't do it in 180 days, it goes void. So we have two processes to go through. I'm afraid we're not going to be there in 6 months. I hope we are, but if we're not, I don't want our CSM to go void. So what I'd like to do is, instead of being required to record the conservation easement concurrently, we can record the conservation easement or record the CSM within 6 months, but hold off on the conservation. That way we've divided the land, but we have no rights to build it.
Jesse?
That's right.
Do we usually record the conservation easement concurrent with the CSM, or do we come in steps on that?
I believe that's current, same with plats. However, my recollection is the condition has been changed prior to site plan and or building permit.
Under the circumstances, if you don't require the conservation easement, it allows them to do a conservation easement that would correctly reflect what might possibly be approved by an NRC decision. So rather than recording a conservation easement now, having to revise the same conservation easement after you've done a special exception. So if you approve the special exception, you're having to move the line on the conservation easement to accommodate that change.
I didn't get from the applicant that he was concerned about the relationship with the NRC, but it was really a timing issue.
So actually not, because here's what's going to happen. If we have to record the conservation easement at the same time as the CSM, all the natural resources that are protected under the UDO go underneath the conservation easement. What I'm saying is that we know to make this project feasible that we're going to be before. What I'm saying is that we know to make this project feasible that we're going to be before. We're going to need a natural resource special exception that will change the boundaries of the conservation easement. So,
which is what I just said.
Exactly.
You want to do the CSM after the NRS?
No, we want to go ahead.
CSM after the NRS.
No, we want to go ahead and allow him to move forward with the CSM to get the CSM recorded so he can complete his real estate transaction. What we're saying is, rather than doing the conservation easement now, based on where the boundary is now, then when he does the conservation, the NRSE, if you approve boundary is now, then when he does the conservation, the NRSE, if you approve the NRSE, now you're moving that conservation easement boundary. So he has to amend the conservation easement.
So you're okay with?
I'm okay with booting the conservation easement until after we're done with the site plan, because presumably the site plan, or when the building permit is done, that's after the special exception would possibly be approved, potentially.
So what is the recommended motion? Does that accomplish what we're talking about?
If you strike condition number 6 in the CSM, yeah, in the CSM resolution, if you strike number 6, then that would get him where he needs to be. I also want to point out that there currently is a conservation easement on part of Lot 2
Here.
already in place, so we're already going to be in that position. So I'd rather not complicate.
In lieu of just striking it, shouldn't it be changed to prior to building permit at a minimum?
Yeah, I think so. Let's do that instead. That would be even better.
I talked to the applicant and his engineer about, 2 weeks ago, maybe a little bit longer. I'm okay with conservation easement. What I don't see on here is the things we talked about. First of all, I appreciate that the road can't go through. I mean, it's pretty much going to be impossible for the road to go through that one. So it's called a temporary turn. We did talk about having a utility easement running down the west side of the parcel. So if I say something was developed on the south end of that, I want to be able to stick a sanitary sewer or a water main through that area. I did not see that in the packet. I did not see that in the packet. The other thing we talked about was it's labeled the temporary turnaround easement. I was expecting, I searched my emails today, I don't think I've seen it if it's been sent to me. I was supposed to see a truck turning radius for a semi. I was supposed to see a truck turning radius for a semi to be able to turn around.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that. So, but the whole idea is that the temporary turnaround, I want someone to come in, turn around without having to enter the parcel for the use of the, so having to enter the parcel for the use of the so forth. And even that, so I want to make sure that we allow for that. As far as the use goes, I can tell you that I'm very excited about the use. It's, I think, for what could go there, this is a very, for what could go there, this is a very, I want to go on a limb and say it's a very low impact. It's going to be more of a quieter kind of thing. It'll fit in very nicely, except parties. It's, I don't, like I said, there has been a concept plan where they basically have, can rent those for small businesses, and they would each have their own like little garage and like an office space in front. So it's really a cool use and will fit in nice in the park. I do like the fact that there is a trail around. I appreciate the fact the neighbor does not like that, but that was important for me, and I can't wait to get started on the trail design. So I would like to make sure that we have a good turnaround. Because it's not going to be a turnaround. It's not going to be a temporary issue. It's going to be a permanent cul-de-sac kind of situation.
So I'm sorry, I did receive an example turning around within the easement area that's shown on the CSM, so we're confident it can work.
The actual easement or the pavement?
No, it goes into the
So the applicant will have to redesign their site plan to accommodate.
correct. And the user aware of that tonight. We reviewed the exhibits. We've talked with the design engineer. We feel like we actually can make it probably a better situation because the driveways will align with the existing apron on the other side of Monarch.
So obviously I haven't seen that, so obviously conditional approval.
I want to just make sure that, I mean, we're going to be coming in with the use for sure. I mean, that's, everyone knows that, but I mean, the issue tonight, I just want to make sure that we're looking for baseline zoning. We're comfortable with the use that we're under meeting. I don't want that to sway too much into a
Zoning is good, but you're also asking for CSM, right?
Yeah, but the CSM has met all the requirements that staff came up with from engineering to planning. And we're comfortable with creating easements to get the utilities to the south. It's just that I'd like to improve.
So may I make a suggestion?
Okay.
To add a note to the CSN or a condition.
Let's do zoning first, and we'll do CSM.
Zoning, I'm cool with.
Okay, that.
Okay.
Hold on. What's your name?
Zoning. So I move to recommend approval of an ordinance to amend the Unified Development Ordinance zoning map to rezone a certain parcel of land from M1 Limited Industrial District and R2 Estate Single Family Residence District to M1 Limited Industrial District, General Division, parentheses Lot 84 of Ryan Meadows, and an adjacent property located on the west side of 112th Street, approximately 22.88 acres.
Motion by Hannon, second by Leon. Questions? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Haley.
Aye. Commissioner Haley.
Thank you. I believe generally I support this. This makes sense. I understand what the CSM is trying to do. That's all great. I think I have 2 questions and a comment. Just saw in the first half of this meeting was a lengthy discussion, thanks to me, about the appropriateness of the natural resource modifications after the fact. That's my concern. Everybody seems to know what this project is, and it sounds great and all that. Why can't even generally what the site plan would look like? My concerns are that we approve this now, and then we're 3 months from now back in the same situation where they're asking for natural resource exceptions that we might not have considered had we known what it's for. So all I'm asking for in the future is more information on these. There's no reason that we couldn't see a preliminary site plan, that we couldn't be told who it is and what's being proposed. We've heard some innuendo about what it is and how it's great. Plan Commission needs to see Plan Commission needs to see this stuff. Okay, so the CSM makes sense. Moving ahead and approving it puts us in the jeopardy of having to deal with the natural resource exceptions after the fact. The applicant has acknowledged that there will be some exceptions after the fact. The applicant has acknowledged that there will be some. We should be able to know that. They know that. Okay, so I'll drop on that. We've discussed it. You see what happens when you get into these discussions. I think it's simple enough when an applicant comes forward that the Plan Commission will be shown at least a preliminary site plan or some indication of what's happening. I hear a lot of good things, but we don't know what that is, and we're being asked to vote on it. So I'll drop that. It's a warning, I guess, to the Plan Commission that we need to see more information sooner, not later, and not in little bits and pieces. Now, as to my questions, I'd really love to know exactly what the future use is and who the owner would be. If you choose not to share that with us, that's fine. Specifically relating to now, but my concern is this trail talking about, page 9, it shows it, but for whatever reason, it just terminates. That's a natural resource.
Commissioner, that's on the certified survey map, the motion's on the zoning. You know, I've been really lax on parliament. There's lots of reasons why I'm gonna have to become more and more stringent with this kind of questioning. So we can take care of that in a second after we zone, but deal with the zoning. So I ask you to confine your comments to the motion that's been made, which is to approve the certified survey map. Questions in a moment.
That's fine. I'll be glad to do that. I only brought it up because it's relative. We're approving the zoning based upon conditions that may or may not be complied with.
There are no conditions to that zoning. All right, let's deal with the CSM issues for Commissioner Haley after we take a vote.
Oh, no. Okay, great.
Okay.
Okay. I would just ask for somebody to address, when I look closely at the CSM, page 9 in particular, which
Commissioner, we'll call.
CSM, page 9 in particular, which
Commissioner, we'll call on you in a second here. Let's go to a vote on the zoning. Okay?
Okay, I'm good with that.
All right. All those in favor of the motion to, as outlined by Alderwoman Henry, to approve the zoning change signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Alderwoman Henry, to approve the zoning change signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Thank you, Kevin. Okay, motion carries 6 ayes, no noes, no abstentions. On the CSM, Commissioner Haley, it's appropriate to ask your questions now.
Thank you. I would like
Now.
Thank you. I would like clarification. It may be an oversight, but the certified survey map, page 9, shows the easement for a future trail. It does not continue through the site. It stops at a point where it appears to reach natural resource features, and therefore is meaningless, I would argue, as a trail if it doesn't connect to anything. Is that an oversight, or is it the intention to only build a trail that goes to a certain point and then turns around and sends us backwards?
The trail name is for city engineer.
Conversations with the applicant, we talked about a trail along the outer edge, so it looks like we're just looking at this one lot. But for the lot to the south, the discussion was there would be a trail provided that we could basically hug the wetlands, so not get in the wetlands, but hug commitment to do so.
I believe the confusion came because in sheet number 7, the trail easement is stopped by the wetland area. On sheet number 9, the trail easement will go to this is the trail easement.
So
Can you see that?
At the straight now, it would stay along the property line.
These are setbacks.
Page 7 is setbacks along the property line. Page 9 shows a trail easement running from a small wetland north property line along lot 2, running along the property lines along the east side, and then along the north end of lot 3 all the way out to 112th Street.
And if I might, my question is why that trail easement doesn't continue to the west across the distance. Why that trail easement doesn't continue to the west across the distance of the property. It doesn't do any good to have a trail easement that doesn't connect to anything. And I don't know if it's in error in the way it's presented, but we're being asked to approve the CSM.
It's not through the outlaw. It's going into the outlaw. Yeah.
Being asked to approve the CSM.
It's not through the outlaw. It's going into the outlaw. Yeah, I know
Really
you guys
shows
are.
the trail easement from 112th Street west, and then it just terminates.
Page 7, Commissioner Haley.
I can answer that question.
Thank you.
The terminus point along lot 2 at just east of that small wetland, it then turns due north into the outlot area, which the city of Franklin currently owns.
Oh, I see which side you're talking about.
So it actually goes, we're almost done. Well, we're going to own. We're almost done. Well, we're going to own. we are going to take over that outlot, and then it's going to go due north along the west end of that woodland area on the image on the screen that we see. And it's going to essentially go north up towards, I think, Chicory?
Yeah, I apologize for not understanding. If you look at the aerials, there is a...
Kevin can't see this.
Oh.
Kevin, can you see this? Are you watching?
Yes, I can't, no, I can't see it, but I've studied the documents, and all I'm looking for is, I think I heard the answer, that at the point where this easement would terminate, the new trail would, all I want to do is make sure that that's there, because there's talk about they're granting this trail easement, and without a logical way for it to continue on to the west, it's meaningless. And I just wanted to make sure that we have something in place that ultimately this trail can be accommodated.
So it has gone to accept the complete outlot, but we still have to work out the details to make the transition happen.
So what I'm hearing is the outlot would ultimately, based on council approval, become city property, and then we would construct a trail that somehow connects to point. That's what I wanted to understand. I just wanted an assurance that.
Okay.
Just telling us one of the good things about this is that they're granting the easement. I want to make sure that it's effective and accomplishes something.
Anything else on the CSM?
No.
Alderman. No. Oh wait.
So.
Oh yeah, we got the truck radius.
We got the temporary turning radius, and then we have the utilities. So you say that you have seen a turning. So you say that you have seen a turning radius. I guess I haven't seen that, so I'd like to verify that we can make a cul-de-sac that would work for an 18-wheeler to come down, turn around, and get in the property. And then I don't believe you come in and tell the utilities.
Well, we didn't.
And I don't believe you come in and tell the utilities.
Well, we didn't put utility easements on here. So we were responding to the city review comments on the CSM. We're going to know a whole lot more about utility layout when we get into the site plan and the preliminary engineering. Utility layout when we get into the site plan and the preliminary engineering. But I guess could we approve the certified survey map based on city engineer comments regarding those two items?
Yeah, you can provide adequate.
I've got the exhibit for the turnaround. That's not where on the south property line there's going to be an easement that goes for utilities.
I guess I'm open to negotiation left or right as long as we can punch through, yeah.
Sure.
Commissioner Haley?
Go ahead.
I'm just seeking clarification. It was a temporary turnaround easement, and I believe the city engineer indicated earlier that the intention is that to be a permanent cul-de-sac turnaround, which is it. And if it's to be a permanent, then it should be shown as such on the CSM.
It's going to become permanent and slightly larger.
I thought that's why it's a temporary turnaround.
We called it temporary because we were just going to go through, and then when the development to the west happened, for some way that lost its connectivity.
Permanent, if it's permanent, does it meet the unified development length?
It does not meet the condition.
Well, then you can't do a permanent turnaround. So it's temporary, and it goes through to the west when that gets developed.
The west was developed, and they put a big block fence, right up there.
Well, then it goes to the south, right? Isn't that the other alternative?
It goes to the south, but you're plowing through protected wetlands.
Public right-of-way is exempt from natural resource special exceptions, correct? Natural resource special exceptions, correct?
Essential services would be.
Yes.
Okay, so it's...
If I might, my point is, if it's to be there permanent, we don't call it temporary, it should be dedicated as street right-of-way. Permanent, we don't call it temporary, it should be dedicated as street right-of-way, whether it changes in the future or not. Calling it temporary, and then 20 years from now it's still there, doesn't really serve the city's best needs. I'm just talking about getting this DSM correct. If it's temporary, it's temporary. If it's permanent, it's DSM correct. If it's temporary, it's temporary. If it's permanent, it should be a dedication.
They will need to see a reservation for public-private location.
That's my point.
Okay, city engineer's gonna follow through, but what Mr. Haley just said is exactly what I said whenever this issue arose previously. Don't call it a temporary easement if it's fake. So when I saw it, I assumed it's temporary, and through the years with this development, we've had discussion of the road proceeding west, southwest, or south.
Correct. On how the wall got, if you recall how those discussions went. There's a nice big brick wall.
How did that happen? Vacated as street right-of-way, it can always be vacated in the future if it's not needed, but in the interest of orderly development, it should either be a temporary easement or a dedication.
Said get it. Said get it.
I want to, I'd like to leave it as, this is how the plat of Ryan Meadows is platted, with a temporary turnaround.
It's not temporary. Well, it's not going to attract anything, it's not temporary. Standards if it's permanent. So if we can't meet the permanent requirements, we need to find a road access that goes someplace else at the end of it, or up the road, so that the cul-de-sac becomes shorter. How about 2 weeks and you figure it out? Is there a motion to table this to the next meeting?
So,
We will need a extension in writing for the time.
Do it on the record verbally now and write it out.
I grant the city a 2-week extension for the approval of CSM.
All right, the motion was by Commissioner Hogan. Second by Hammond. All those in favor of the motion to table for the next planning commission meeting, signify by saying aye. Motion carries. Is there a motion to adjourn?
so moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries, and again, apologies for the technology issues, but everybody has a nice